In the heart of a bustling medieval village, where the air was thick with the scent of roasted meats and the occasional waft of something decidedly less appetizing, a rather peculiar scene was about to unfold. Sir Reginald, a nobleman with more pomposity than sense, found himself in a most unfortunate predicament. The grand feast had taken a toll on his royal stomach, and the only thing standing between him and relief was the notorious garderobe, a wooden closet perched perilously over a pit, famed for its lack of privacy and even poorer hygiene. As he approached the garderobe, Reginald's mind was preoccupied with the evening's roast boar and the unflattering remarks from Lady Beatrice about his thinning hair. Little did he know, lurking nearby was young Squire Barnaby, a clumsy lad tasked with fetching water but far more skilled at spilling it. Barnaby, with his arms full of chamber pots, had spotted the nobleman and decided it was the perfect moment for eavesdropping. "Sir Reginald," he called out, tripping over his own feet and sending a cascade of chamber pots clattering to the ground. "Are you, busy?" "Busy? I'm about to engage in a most sacred act of nature," Reginald retorted, his voice echoing off the stone walls. He pushed open the creaking door, only to be greeted by Brother Alaric, the local monk, clutching his stomach in distress. "Ah, brother. Surely you can't be here to discuss the virtues of sanitation in such a compromising position?" The monk grimaced, his digestive issues making him a frequent visitor to the garderobe. "Reginald, I'm merely seeking solace in this chaotic world," he exclaimed, accidentally knocking over a chamber pot in his haste. As the nobleman settled onto the wooden seat, more of a throne of misery than a seat of comfort, he couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of their situation. Here they were, a nobleman, a squire, and a monk, all bound by the universal truth that everyone, even the esteemed, must answer nature's call. Little did they know, the ensuing chaos would turn this sacred moment into a hilariously unforgettable tale of medieval mishaps, all while providing a rather enlightening glimpse into the plumbing practices, or lack thereof, of their time. The sacred nature of sanitation in the Middle Ages. In a time when knights roamed the land and castles towered over quaint villages, the Middle Ages were also a period of peculiar practices, particularly concerning sanitation. While we often think of hygiene as a modern concern, the medieval world had its own quirky and often hilarious take on the subject. Surprisingly, there existed places where the act of relieving oneself was not merely a mundane necessity but was considered sacred, or at least, amusingly ritualistic. Imagine, if you will, a bustling castle on a foggy morning, where the noble lords and ladies prepared for a day of feasting and jousting, while unbeknownst to them, a symphony of gastrointestinal distress played out in the shadows. Enter our unlikely hero, Sir Cedric, a clumsy squire tasked with the noble job of ensuring the castle's garderobe was in tip-top shape. The garderobe, that charming medieval invention which served as both a toilet and a wardrobe, provided a unique blend of convenience and exposure. It was essentially a small room with a wooden seat positioned over a deep pit, often located right next to the Lord's chamber, where one could quickly relieve themselves while contemplating the finer points of feudal duty, or, more likely, how to avoid the wrath of the cook after a particularly lavish feast. One fateful day, as Sir Cedric was polishing the armor of his lord, he felt the undeniable rumble of his stomach, a reminder that the peasant stew he had devoured the night before was staging a rebellion. With a hurried excuse about checking the drawbridge, he dashed off to the garderobe, a place he had grown to know all too well. As he entered, he was met with a most unexpected sight. Brother Alban, the castle's monk, was already seated, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Ah, Sir Cedric. A moment of solitude, if you please," the monk exclaimed, clutching his stomach as if it were a sacred relic. "Solitude? In the garderobe?" Cedric chuckled, awkwardly shifting from foot to foot. "That's as rare as a dragon sighting." Just then, the noble Lady Imogen flounced in, her gown billowing behind her. "Oh, good heavens! Is that a smell of sanctity or sheer disaster? She gasped, pinching her nose dramatically. Sanctity. Yes, indeed, Brother Alban declared, waving his hands as if casting a spell. For every act of nature must be revered. Cedric, struggling to maintain his composure, accidentally knocked over a chamber pot that had been carelessly left behind. It clattered to the floor, spilling its contents with a splat that echoed off the walls like a medieval symphony gone awry. A sacred disaster, he shrieked, trying to stem the flow with his boots. Lady Imogen, in a fit of laughter, retorted, "Perhaps we should call for the jester. This is a performance worthy of the court." As the monk turned a shade of crimson that could rival the finest red wine, Cedric slipped and fell, landing squarely in the muck. Amidst the chaos, he managed to declare, "Fear not. For every great knight must face his trials, though mine may be a bit more literal." Just then, the castle steward barged in, only to witness Sir Cedric flailing like a fish out of water, Brother Alban chanting a prayer for deliverance, and Lady Imogen doubled over in laughter. "What in the name of all that is holy is happening here?" he bellowed. "Sanctity, dear steward. We are shining a light on the sacredness of our humble toilets," Brother Alban proclaimed, now resembling a rather disheveled prophet of hygiene. And so it was that the reputation of the Garderobe grew, not just as a place of necessity, but as a gathering of the peculiar, where nobility, clergy, and clumsy squires alike could find laughter amid the trials of medieval life. In that moment, they all learned that sometimes, even the most sacred of places could turn into the site of hilariously unexpected camaraderie. After all, who knew that the act of pooping could be the starting point of such noble friendships? In the heart of the castle, where the echoes of chivalry met the unmistakable scent of the Garderobe, Sir Reginald braced himself for an experience unlike any other. As he reluctantly approached the wooden door, he could hear the unmistakable sound of Brother Alaric's muffled prayers mingling with the gurgling of the waste chute. Today, it seemed, the fates had conspired for a perfect storm of hilarity. Reginald pushed the door open only to find Squire Barnaby, his trousers around his ankles, frantically waving a chamber pot as if it were a banner of defeat. "Sir Reginald," he exclaimed, eyes wide with embarrassment. "This pot was meant for disposal." Just then, Brother Alaric, clutching his stomach, burst in, misinterpreting Barnaby's frantic gestures as an invitation to share his own digestive woes. As the three men jostled for space, a sudden commotion erupted outside the Garderobe. Lady Imogen, known for her sharp tongue and sharper wit, had caught wind of the scene. "Pray tell, what manner of knightly conduct is this?" she roared, her laughter echoing through the halls. In a moment of pure chaos, Barnaby stumbled backward, colliding with the waste chute, while Reginald, red-faced and desperate, attempted to shield his dignity with the very chamber pot Barnaby had nearly flung. The scene dissolved into a cacophony of laughter, where even the most noble of titles couldn't save them from the absurdity of their predicament. As they emerged from the Garderobe, still chuckling and forever bonded by their shared embarrassment, it was clear. Even the most genteel of knights and the most pious of monks couldn't escape the universal truth of human nature. Sometimes, life's messiest moments are the ones worth celebrating. And as they walked away, the scent of camaraderie lingered much longer than any lingering odor of the past. A royal throne of unfortunate design. In the heart of the sprawling castle of Wensleydale, where knights clanged their armor and ladies fluttered their fans, there lay a curious architectural marvel known as the Garderobe. This wasn't a quaint little nook for storing garments, but rather a toilet, a throne of sorts, albeit one with an unfortunate design that would make even the most intrepid nobleman reconsider his dietary choices. Our story begins on a crisp autumn morning, as Sir Percival, a rather portly knight with a penchant for the finest meats and cheeses, found himself in dire need of relief. He waddled his way toward the Garderobe, a term he had recently learned from a rather studious squire, young Harold, who was forever reading dusty tomes in the castle library. "Good day, Sir Percival," Harold chirped, rushing to catch up. "Are you headed to the Garderobe? I've heard it's a marvel of medieval engineering." "Marvel? More like a medieval nightmare," Percival grumbled, clutching his belly. "If there's one thing that can ruin a knight's reputation, it's a poorly designed throne." As they approached the wooden door adorned with a crudely painted sign of a man in distress, Percival felt a twinge of dread. The Garderobe was a small chamber with a hole above the castle's moat. A design that was both ingenious and utterly horrifying. "Why do they call it a garderobe?" he grunted, shifting uncomfortably. "There's nothing, guardian, about this place." Harold, now flustered, began to explain. You see, garderobe comes from the French, meaning to guard one's clothes. It was believed that the smell would ward off moths. More like ward off friends, Percival muttered as he pushed the door open. Inside, he found a dimly lit room, the air thick with the pungent aroma of what could only be described as a medieval gas chamber. As he settled himself upon the unyielding wooden seat, the door swung open with a creak. In walked Brother Alaric, a monk with a penchant for herbal remedies and an unfortunate reputation for frequent digestive distress. Sir Percival. I hope I'm not interrupting," he exclaimed, his face a mask of earnestness. "Brother Alaric, I'm in a precarious situation here," Percival cried, waving his hands. "I would appreciate a bit of privacy." "Privacy? In a place where the walls could talk, my good knight?" Alaric chuckled, oblivious to Percival's plight. Why, they'd surely sing ballads about our most sacred of bodily functions. Just then, Harold, eager to impress, tried to squeeze his way into the cramped space, only to trip over a chamber pot left carelessly in the corner. With a clatter, the pot spilled its contents across the floor, sending a foul stench wafting through the air. "By the Holy Grail!" Percival yelled, his face turning green. "This is worse than the dragon I fought last summer." Amidst the chaos, Alaric, undeterred, began to recite a prayer, a most inappropriate choice for the occasion. "May the Lord cleanse us of our sins and our odors," he intoned, raising his hands as if invoking divine intervention. "Brother, please. Save the blessings for after I escape this chamber of horrors." Percival groaned, gripping the sides of the garderobe as if it were a ship caught in a tempest. Finally, realizing the absurdity of their situation, Harold burst into laughter, a sound that echoed off the stone walls. "Sir Percival, you wear your armor for battle, but it seems the true challenge lies within the garderobe." With a mighty sigh of relief, Percival emerged from the throne, face flushed but spirit buoyed. "Next time, I'll take my chances with the dragon," he declared, striding out with newfound determination. As the trio exited the garderobe, the sun shone brightly outside, and the sweet scent of the moat's flowers wafted through the air. Perhaps not all was lost in the realm of medieval sanitation. After all, every noble knight needed a good laugh, even if it came from the least noble of thrones. In the grand halls of Castle Blunderbuss, where laughter echoed louder than the clash of swords, Sir Reginald found himself embroiled in a most peculiar predicament. As he tiptoed towards the garderobe, a medieval marvel of plumbing that offered little more than a precarious wooden seat over a gaping hole, he could hear Lady Beatrice's barbed comments about his thinning hair. "If only your wit were as full as your scalp, dear Reginald," she mused, unaware of the chaos about to unfold. Just as Sir Reginald settled down for a moment of relief, an unfortunate clatter erupted outside. Squire Barnaby, the ever-clumsy apprentice, had tripped over a chamber pot while trying to eavesdrop. "Foul fiend!" he yelped, sending the pot flying and narrowly missing Brother Alaric, who was desperately trying to meditate amidst his own digestive distress. "Is this a place for the pious or the foolhardy?" Brother Alaric lamented, clutching his stomach as he entered the garderobe, only to find it occupied by Reginald, who was now blushing a shade deeper than his tunic. Amidst the cacophony of misunderstandings and the foul odor wafting from the depths of the garderobe, Sir Cedric and Lady Imogen stumbled upon the scene, their aristocratic airs quickly deflating as they witnessed the chaos. Ah, the circle of life, or perhaps just the circle of waste? Lady Imogen chuckled, as they all shared a laugh, realizing that nobility and peasantry alike were bound by the same, universally humorous plight. In that unsightly chamber, surrounded by the remnants of medieval hygiene, or lack thereof, the group found an unexpected camaraderie. The laughter transcended social status, reminding them that even the most awkward scenarios could forge friendships and create memories worth cherishing. As they exited the garderobe, hearts lighter and spirits lifted, the noble and the commoner alike had learned that sometimes, laughter is the best sanitation of all. The clumsy squire's toilet trials. A day in the life. The clumsy squire's toilet trials. In the heart of Wensleydale Castle, where knights strutted with their polished armor and ladies twirled their skirts like peacocks, our hapless hero, Squire Cedric, faced perhaps the greatest challenge of his day. The dreaded garderobe. To the uninitiated, this was merely a medieval toilet, but for Cedric, it was a labyrinth of potential embarrassment, an echo chamber of misfortune. As he approached the garderobe, the aroma of something distinctly unholy wafted through the air, clinging to the stone walls like an unwelcome guest. Cedric steeled himself. He had heard the tales. How it was a place where nobles could expel their worries, albeit not without an audience. Privacy was a luxury reserved for the royal family, and Cedric was neither royal nor particularly graceful. "Ah, Squire Cedric," boomed Lord Reginald, a nobleman with a penchant for unsolicited advice and an alarming interest in personal hygiene. "There's a fine breeze today, perfect for conducting one's business." He winked with all the subtlety of a bear in a china shop. "Yes, my lord," Cedric mumbled, trying to sidestep the man's gaze as he shuffled toward the garderobe, which was, quite literally, a wooden bench with a hole above a filthy ditch. "I hope the breeze carries your concerns away." With a deep breath, Cedric perched himself on the bench, which creaked ominously beneath him. Just as he settled in, he heard an urgent whisper from the shadows. "Psst. Squire." It was Brother Alban, the castle's resident monk, who had a reputation for his digestive woes. "Have you any extra herbs? The lentil stew has betrayed me." Before Cedric could respond, an unexpected rumble echoed from his own belly, a sound that could only be described as a trumpet of impending doom. In that moment, the squire realized he was trapped in a comedy of errors. With a sudden lurch, he rose from his precarious perch, but not before a loud plop resonated through the garderobe, followed by a collective gasp from the nearby audience of curious onlookers. Cedric's cheeks flared crimson as he stumbled backward, nearly colliding with a chamber pot that had been left precariously close to his feet. "Watch out!" he yelped, but alas, it was too late. The pot tipped over, sending its contents cascading across the floor like an unfortunate waterfall. "By the saints!" cried Lady Margaret, who was just passing by on her way to the tapestry room. "What manner of sorcery is this?" "Not sorcery, my lady. Merely a clumsy squire." Cedric could only laugh awkwardly, a nervous chuckle that only heightened the absurdity of the situation. Lord Reginald, ever the opportunist, seized the moment. "Ah, the noble art of sanitation. Clearly, our dear Cedric has a unique interpretation of cleanliness." He winked again, earning a chorus of chuckles from the onlookers, who now had a story that would echo through the halls of Wensleydale for ages. As the squire attempted to clean up the mess with what little dignity remained, Brother Alban emerged from the shadows, clutching a handful of herbs. "I see you've discovered the sacred nature of the garderobe, my boy. It is here that we are all equal, noble and squire alike, united in our natural endeavors." Cedric groaned, knowing that no matter how many times he'd readied himself to face the world always had a way of coming back with more challenges. With a final glance at the bemused crowd, he declared, "Next time, I'll stick to the chamber pot." And thus, with a mixture of laughter and sympathy, the day continued in Wensleydale, where the art of toilet humor, both literal and metaphorical, remained a cherished tradition. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the castle, Sir Reginald found himself fidgeting nervously in the corridor leading to the garderobe. The evening's grand feast loomed ahead, and with it, the looming specter of critical gazes on his meticulously styled hair. Little did he know, fate had scheduled an unconventional rendezvous in the castle's notorious toilet. Meanwhile, Squire Barnaby, ever the bumbling fool, was attempting to eavesdrop on Reginald's anxious musings. In his zeal, he tripped over a discarded chamber pot, sending it crashing to the floor with a scandalous clang that echoed through the stone halls. "By the saints!" Reginald exclaimed, glancing back in horror at the ruckus. As Reginald finally entered the garderobe, he was greeted not by the tranquil solitude he had hoped for but by Brother Alaric, fervently praying for divine intervention to remedy his ongoing digestive tribulations. "Oh, blessed Saint Benedict, grant me relief," the monk moaned, his robes pooled around him like a shroud of despair. Just as Reginald was about to join in the solemnity, Lady Imogen burst in, her curiosity piqued by the commotion. "What's all this about?" she inquired, her eyes wide with mischief. The sight of the nobleman and monk in such a predicament sent her into fits of laughter. With chaos swirling about, Barnaby, still reeling from his earlier tumble, poked his head through the door, only to find himself face to face with a chamber pot that had taken on a life of its own. With a squeal, he slipped and landed unceremoniously at the feet of Lady Imogen, sending everyone into a chorus of laughter. In that moment, amid the laughter and the absurdity of their shared plight, they all discovered an unexpected truth. The most scandalous and chaotic moments often forge the strongest bonds. The night would go on to be one for the annals of history, not for its grand feast, but for the hilarity that unfolded in the most unlikely of places, a medieval toilet. And in a world where hygiene was an afterthought, they learned that sometimes, a good laugh was the best remedy for a troubled stomach. Eavesdropping and embarrassing confessions. In the heart of Wensleydale Castle, where knights strutted with their polished armor and ladies twirled their skirts like peacocks, our hapless squire, Cedric, found himself in a most peculiar predicament. The sun had barely risen, casting a golden hue over the stone walls, when a rumble in his stomach indicated that breakfast had been far too generous. However, Cedric was not just any squire. He was the most clumsy squire in the realm, and he had a knack for stumbling into the most embarrassing situations, especially when it came to the castle's infamous garderobe. Now, in the medieval times, the garderobe was a marvel of architecture and a source of great discomfort. It was essentially a hole in the wall that led to a deep pit, often shared by more than one inhabitant. Privacy? What was that? It was a place where one could hear the echoes of their own embarrassment, amplified by the lack of partitions and an audience of nosy nobles. On this particular morning, Cedric had no choice but to make his way to the garderobe, a daunting task that required navigating the narrow corridors of the castle without drawing attention. Alas, as he approached, he overheard a familiar voice, Lady Eleanor, the most inquisitive noblewoman in the kingdom. She was known for her penchant for eavesdropping, and today, she was in rare form, chatting animatedly with her gaggle of giggling handmaidens. "Did you hear?" Lady Eleanor whispered, her voice dripping with intrigue. "I heard that the Duke's chamber pot is so ornate that he keeps it under lock and key. Can you imagine? A sacred throne for his royal backside." Cedric's heart raced. A sacred throne? The very thought of a chamber pot being revered brought an image of a gilded toilet to his mind, complete with velvet cushions. He had to find out more, yet the urgency of his own bodily needs pressed against him like an impatient squire waiting for a knight's command. As he edged closer, Cedric accidentally bumped into a monk, Brother Ambrose, who had just emerged from the shadows, his face contorted in discomfort. "Ah, Cedric. You must help me," the monk exclaimed, clutching his belly. "I've been afflicted by a most troublesome case of the gastrointestinal grievances. Oh, Brother Ambrose, I too am in dire need of the garderobe," Cedric replied, trying to mask his urgency with sympathy. Just then, Lady Eleanor caught sight of the duo, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Oh, what a thrilling sight! A squire and a monk, side by side. "Whatever could you be up to?" Cedric, flustered and bright red in the face, stammered, we were just discussing, the sanctity of chamber pots." "Sanctity?" Lady Eleanor's voice rose an octave. "What a curious topic. Tell me more." In a moment of desperation, Cedric blurted out, "Yes. It is said that certain chamber pots are blessed by the clergy and can bring good fortune to those who use them." The handmaidens gasped in unison, hanging on his every word. "Really? How delightful!" One piped up. "Perhaps the Duke's pot is blessed by the Archbishop himself." Brother Ambrose's eyes widened, and he raised a finger. "That is not how blessings work." "The blessings are." But before he could finish, a loud crash interrupted them. Cedric's foot had slipped on a stray chamber pot left unattended, sending him tumbling forward. He collided with the garderobe door, which swung open with a creak, revealing the dreaded pit below. It was a moment of sheer horror as Cedric lost his balance, arms flailing, and fell right into the pit. The shrieks from Lady Eleanor and her handmaidens echoed off the stone walls, while Brother Ambrose clutched his belly, torn between laughter and concern. "Oh dear, Cedric. I suppose that's one way to demonstrate the sacredness of the throne." As Cedric struggled to climb back out, the realization dawned on him. Perhaps the true sacredness of the chamber pot lay not in its gold or glory, but in the camaraderie of those who shared the trials of medieval sanitation. And so, amidst the laughter and the chaos, the clumsy squire found himself the unwitting hero of a most unfortunate yet hysterical toilet trial. One that would be talked about long after the echoes of his embarrassing fall faded into the annals of Wensleydale Castle history. In the heart of the bustling castle, where the scent of roasting meat mingled with the earthy aroma of the nearby stables, Sir Reginald found himself in an unexpected predicament. The grand hall had been filled with laughter and merriment, but now he faced a pressing matter that required immediate attention, the call of nature that could no longer be ignored. "Barnaby, fetch me the chamber pot," he bellowed, his noble stature momentarily diminished by the urgency of his plight. Squire Barnaby, ever the clumsy apprentice, tripped over his own feet, sending a cascade of pots clattering to the floor. "My lord, I fear the chamber pot has escaped," he exclaimed, red-faced as he wrestled with the rebellious vessel. Meanwhile, Brother Alaric, a monk known for his rather sensitive stomach, shuffled past, clutching his rosary as if it were a lifeline. "Good Sir Reginald, I implore you, do not tarry," he cautioned, his own digestive woes making him somewhat of an expert on the urgency of bathroom matters. "The garderobe awaits us, though it is not a place for the faint of heart." Ah, the garderobe, a peculiar contraption that combined the elegance of a noble's attire with the less than elegant realities of medieval sanitation. Sir Reginald and his companions trudged through the narrow passage, where the walls reeked of years of unmentionable deposits. There, the toilet seat, a simple wooden plank over a gaping hole, beckoned them with the promise of relief. But as Sir Reginald perched precariously on the edge, a loud crash erupted from above. Lady Imogen had inadvertently sent a fine silk gown tumbling down from the upper balcony, landing squarely in the very spot Sir Reginald wished to occupy. "Reginald, my dear, you seem to have a bit of a predicament," she exclaimed, stifling a laugh as she watched the chaos unfold. In that moment, with silk draped over the throne of nature, laughter echoed through the garderobe, binding them all in a moment of shared hilarity. It was a reminder that in the midst of medieval madness, even the most uncomfortable situations could be transformed into moments of joy and camaraderie. As they exited the garderobe, The trio wiped tears of laughter from their eyes, realizing that while the medieval toilet may have been a place of necessity, it also served as a surprising catalyst for friendship and humor in a world often overshadowed by filth and folly. And so, with hearts lighter and spirits lifted, they ventured back to the festivities, ready to regale their fellow nobles with tales of the day's absurdity, proving that even in the most dire of circumstances, laughter truly is the best remedy. A holy disturbance. The monk's digestive dilemma, a holy disturbance. In the heart of Wensleydale Castle, as Cedric the squire tried to avoid the watchful gaze of noblemen and the gossiping ladies, his stomach grumbled with urgency. It seemed that the rich feasts he had devoured during the last banquet were now demanding a hasty exit. Alas, the idea of finding a toilet in this grand fortress was not as simple as it sounded. "Ah, Cedric. Off to commune with nature, are we?" cackled Lord Falcon, a particularly nosy noble with a penchant for mischief. His laughter echoed through the stone corridors, and Cedric's cheeks flushed crimson. "Just avoid the garderobe. Last time I checked, it was more of a guard nobility affair." Cedric grimaced, his mind swirling with thoughts of the infamous garderobe, a medieval toilet that, much to his dismay, was nothing more than a hole in the wall where one would relieve themselves while perched precariously high above a pit of stagnant waste. The thought of sitting there while noblemen chattered nearby was enough to send him into a mild panic. "Why can't they build a modern loo?" he muttered under his breath, recalling the tales of the great Roman aqueducts that had supplied public baths. But alas, this was the Middle Ages, where chamber pots were the pinnacle of hygiene, and privacy was a luxury reserved for the very privileged, or the very fortunate. Determined not to be deterred, Cedric made his way toward the castle's garderobe, trying to appear dignified despite the urgency in his stride. As he approached the wooden door, he overheard a rather peculiar conversation between Brother Alaric and Sister Agnes, who were both standing outside, their voices rising in pitch. "Have you heard? The bishop claims that relieving oneself in the woods is a sacred act." Brother Alaric exclaimed, clutching his stomach. "He says it brings one closer to God." Sister Agnes rolled her eyes. "Closer to God, perhaps. But what about closer to the rabid foxes lurking about? I'd rather not be eaten while I'm at my most vulnerable." Cedric snorted, stifling a laugh, but his amusement was cut short by a sudden, unmistakable noise emanating from within the garderobe. It sounded like a gurgling brook, but according to the foul stench, it was likely the result of a poor soul's recent visit to the throne. With no time to waste, he pushed the door open, bracing himself for the worst. Inside, the garderobe was dimly lit by a flickering torch, its stone walls adorned with the most unfortunate graffiti of past users, drawings of cats, crude jokes, and the occasional heart encircling the names of star-crossed lovers. He took a deep breath, steeling himself against the nausea that threatened to rise. As he lifted the hem of his tunic and approached the empty seat, a sudden clatter resounded from just outside. The door swung open, and in stumbled Sir Reginald, the clumsy knight known for his less than graceful demeanor. "Cedric. I need to, oh," he exclaimed, eyes widening in shock as he beheld the squire's precarious position. "You're in the middle of?" "Not a word, Reginald," Cedric hissed, scrambling to cover himself with his tunic. But Sir Reginald, ever the oaf, tripped over his own feet, sending a chamber pot tumbling over. The contents splattered dramatically across the stone floor, and the two young men stood frozen in horror as the foul liquid pooled around their feet. "By all that's holy!" Cedric shrieked, "This is why we can't have nice things." Just then, Brother Alaric and Sister Agnes, still engaged in their theological debate, burst through the door, their expressions shifting from confusion to horror. "What in the name of the saints is happening in here?" Sister Agnes gasped, covering her nose. Amidst the chaos, Cedric realized that perhaps the only thing worse than using a garderobe was sharing the experience with his friends. As laughter erupted from the doorway, he couldn't help but join in, a chorus of giggles bouncing off the stone walls. In that moment of shared embarrassment, he understood that even in the most trying of situations, humor had a way of cleansing the spirit. Even if the chamber pot couldn't quite do the same for the floor. And as they all hurried away from the scene, Cedric vowed to keep a closer eye on his diet. At least until a proper toilet was built in Wensleydale Castle. In the heart of a bustling medieval castle, where the scent of roasted meats mingled with the earthy aroma of horse dung, the noble Sir Reginald found himself in quite the predicament. As he prepared for the grand feast of Lord Winstanley, he realized he had to navigate the infamous garderobe, a quaint term for the castle's not-so-pleasant toilet. With the chamber pot clutched under one arm and a roll of parchment in the other, Reginald entered the small, dimly lit room. He was immediately met by the inquisitive gaze of Squire Barnaby, who had chosen that very moment to practice his balance on a nearby ledge. "Reginald, careful with that pot. You don't want to repeat last week's mishap," Barnaby shouted, a grin spreading across his face. Reginald rolled his eyes, recalling the chaos that ensued when Barnaby, in a moment of sheer clumsiness, had sent a chamber pot flying through the air, landing spectacularly on Brother Alaric's freshly washed robes. The memory still made him chuckle, even as he battled his own urgent need. Just as he settled on the wobbly wooden seat, the door swung open, revealing Brother Alaric, who, in his haste to avoid the smell, failed to notice the nobleman inside. "Ah! Reginald," Alaric exclaimed, clutching his stomach. "Have you seen the herbal remedy for my digestive issues? I fear I may have overindulged in the Lord's stew." Reginald, caught between laughter and horror, could only gesture helplessly with the chamber pot. "Not now, brother. This is hardly the place for a consultation." But the monk, undeterred, stepped closer, oblivious to the awkwardness of their shared moment. Meanwhile, the faint sound of giggles echoed from the corridor as Lady Genevieve, the castle's ever-curious noblewoman, approached. "Oh, Sir Reginald. I must inquire about the state of your affairs," she called out, her laughter ringing as she leaned against the doorframe, entirely too comfortable for a scene so private. With a face as red as a ripe tomato, Reginald knew he had to act fast. "I believe the chamber pot may be in need of disposal," he stammered, trying to retain some semblance of dignity. As he attempted to rise, he lost his balance, sending the pot teetering perilously close to the edge. In a flurry of movement, Barnaby leapt forward, only to trip over his own feet, sending himself crashing into the wall and knocking over a hanging tapestry that obscured their view. The fabric billowed down like a curtain, concealing their chaotic scene from the rest of the castle. The laughter intensified as the four of them found themselves in a tangle of limbs, robes, and the infamous chamber pot. At that moment, amidst the hilarity and embarrassment, Reginald realized that perhaps the true essence of medieval life lay not in the grand feasts or noble titles but in shared laughter over the most human of experiences. As they finally extricated themselves, the nobleman couldn't help but chuckle. "Well, my friends, it seems even the garderobe can foster camaraderie." And in that dimly lit toilet, amidst the chaos of medieval sanitation, a bond was forged. One that would surely outlast any chamber pot mishap. Lessons learned from medieval lavatories. In the medieval world of Wensleydale Castle, the noblemen and women prided themselves on their lineage and lavish feasts. But behind the grand halls and sumptuous banquets lay an overlooked but essential aspect of daily life. The lavatory. Yes, dear reader. The very act of relieving oneself was steeped in both humor and historical significance. Let us delve into the realm of medieval toilets, where the sacred and the silly often collided. Picture this. Cedric the squire, a well-meaning but clumsy lad, found himself in a dilemma of epic proportions. After a hearty meal of roasted boar and a tankard, or three, of ale, Cedric's stomach was in rebellion. The castle's garderobe, a small room with a hole overhanging the castle moat, beckoned him like a siren song, but alas! The nobleman Lord Hodgepodge had stationed himself nearby, gossiping about the latest court scandal with Lady Fluffernutter, who was known for her keen sense of smell. Cedric, ever the anxious squire, tiptoed toward the garderobe, all the while attempting to maintain his dignity. "Excuse me, my lord. I must, attend to a pressing matter," he stammered, his face turning the shade of a ripe tomato. "Pressing? Is it pressing like the matter of the missing goblet from last week's feast? Or is it of a more personal nature?" Lord Hodgepodge chuckled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Cedric's heart raced. "It's a matter of digestive urgency, my lord." He darted past Hodgepodge, who merely raised an eyebrow and continued his gossip. Inside the garderobe, Cedric was greeted by the unmistakable aroma of, history. The medieval toilet was a marvel of its time. A simple wooden seat with an open hole, allowing one's offerings to drop directly into the moat below. The design, while practical, left much to be desired in terms of privacy. Just as he settled in, the door swung open, and in walked Brother Barnaby, the castle's resident monk with a reputation for having the most unfortunate of digestive issues. "Ah, Cedric. Perfect timing. I need to borrow your, throne," Brother Barnaby exclaimed, his eyes wide with urgency. "Brother, surely you can wait a moment?" Cedric replied, squirming in embarrassment. Wait. The Holy Scriptures are no match for the call of nature." Brother Barnaby insisted, hopping from foot to foot. In a moment of sheer desperation, Cedric, still seated, shouted, "Then let us pray for a swift resolution." As fate would have it, at that very moment, the keeper of the chamber pots, a sprightly lad named Tom, burst in, carrying a full pot in one hand and an empty one in the other. His eyes widened in horror as he witnessed the scene before him. A squire on the throne, a monk dancing with urgency, and the faint sound of giggling from outside, where Lady Fluffernutter was now proclaiming the latest toilet humor to the court. "By the saints, what is this? A gathering of the unseemly?" Tom exclaimed, dropping the chamber pot with a splat. The noise echoed through the castle, drawing even more attention. Outside, the noblewomen gasped, and the nobleman laughed heartily. What a scandalous affair! "A royal rendezvous in the lavatory," one exclaimed. In the chaos, Cedric couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Perhaps this is where true nobility lies, in our shared humanity and, our shared lavatories, he quipped, earning a round of laughter from those gathered outside. Ultimately, the medieval toilet experience taught a valuable lesson. That within the walls of Wensleydale, dignity and decorum could easily be washed away by the simple act of nature. The castle's sanitary practices may have been rudimentary by modern standards, but they provided a peculiar camaraderie amongst the residents. Each trip to the garderobe was a reminder that everyone, noble or not, faced the same human conditions, and that laughter truly was the best medicine, even in the most unseemly of situations. So, dear readers, as we reflect on the historical significance of medieval lavatories, let us remember to embrace our shared humanity. And perhaps keep a chamber pot handy if we find ourselves in a tight spot. In the dimly lit corner of Castle Widdershins, nestled between the grand hall and the kitchen, stood the notorious garderobe, a wooden structure that held the secrets of its occupants. Sir Reginald, a portly knight with an appetite for both feasts and folly, found himself in a precarious situation. Just as he settled onto the wooden seat, his armor clanking like a distressed cow, Squire Barnaby burst through the door, eyes wide with urgency. "Sir, you must help me. I've spilled the chamber pot," Barnaby exclaimed, his face a portrait of panic. "By the saints, lad. You've not a care for decorum, have you?" Sir Reginald replied, his dignity unraveling faster than his trousers. Meanwhile, Brother Alaric, the pious monk known for his strict diet of lentils and cabbage, ambled in, clutching his stomach. "Forgive me, noble sirs, but the Holy Spirit is writhing within me," he moaned, his face as pale as the moonlight outside. Amidst the chaos, Lady Imogen, the ever-curious noblewoman, peeked through the half-open door, an eyebrow raised. Is that the scent of righteousness or merely the aftermath of Barnaby's clumsiness? She quipped, stifling a laugh as the poor squire turned a shade of crimson. As the three men fumbled through their embarrassing predicament, the sound of sloshing chamber pots and muffled curses echoed through the garderobe, a cacophony that would have made even the most solemn monk chuckle. In that moment, they realized that nobility and piety were no shields against the common trials of humanity. Laughter erupted, binding them in a camaraderie forged in the unlikeliest of places, reminding everyone that even in the most absurd moments, there lies a shared humanity amidst the chaos of life.